So I wanted to take a somewhat humorous approach to it because there's a lot of serious topics. And when you're talking about the cloud, you're going to hear about the cloud 10 million times for the rest of your life until we come up with a new term in probably 5 years because cloud is old. It'll be the same thing. It'll have a new term. So the overview. Common language. Let's establish some terminology that some of you may be familiar with and kind of make sure we're talking about what we need to be. Key considerations. What do you need to be thinking about? What are the items that you need to be asking yourselves and the vendors when you're making the move? The main goal. Really, what's the point of all this? And we're going to really make sure that you're asking yourself why you're moving to the cloud and make sure that this is the reason you're doing what you're doing, not because it's cool, though that's always fun. And if you want to mock me on Twitter where I can't see or respond for at least half an hour, that's my name and that's the tag. So a quick little survey. So how many people have stuff in the cloud? Wow. What are you doing here? How many people are thinking about or planning on moving to the cloud? A few less hands. How many people took the title literally and really don't know nearly enough about the cloud? And a couple. All right. It's good. It's good. Nice mix. Those of you who raised your hand the first time, asked tough questions, keep me honest. The window for gaining advantage from an infrastructural technology is open only briefly. So Nicholas Carr wrote this about 9 years ago talking about IT. Email is not a competitive advantage. It's the cost of doing business. 20 years ago, or more likely 15, email was a competitive advantage because your competitors didn't have it. You could communicate better than your competitors. So when you start looking at what's going on and what these new things are, you're like, well, I'll just wait and adopt this and deal with this stuff later. You're going to lose a competitive advantage, and yes, you'll have all these lessons learned, and it'll be tried and true, but you won't get to take advantage of it to win, which, a lot of us, we're an association, and, we're not out trying to win or anything else, but we want to help you more than any other association can help you. So we are trying to win to some degree, and so trying to be competitive is important to every organization. It's just who you're competing against is what will vary. So what is the cloud? Well, it depends who you ask. If you read enough stuff, eventually it becomes this magical, happy, fun land where it's just awesome and it's just a happy place until you realize it's full of lines, it's expensive. The more kids you have, the more astronomically expensive it becomes. I haven't taken my kids to Disney yet, but I strongly suspect that in some ways I'll appreciate it more with kids, seeing their joy, but other things were probably going to be more enjoyable, like the fact that I could afford to stay for more than a day when I was just me and my wife. So really, what is it? It's just the internet, people. I mean, the internet came out and it's just a giant network. And we had servers, but we weren't really good with what we were doing, so what are we going to do? Well, websites, basic information. But these things started to evolve. We started to actually take what we were doing in our networks, in our companies, and in our organizations, and just be part of the bigger network. And then the concept of outsourcing this stuff to other organizations. We've had cloud concepts for over 10 years. The service providers that we had in 2000 timeframe of, we'll host your, and this is a real example of someone I dealt with, we'll host your Documentum system and we'll show you RightSite, which if you know what that is, my condolences. We'll share that and you don't have to manage the Documentum system, which in 2000 was a really great concept because it was really hard. But it didn't scale. You couldn't customize it, and we weren't ready yet. When we're doubling the ability of our technology every 18 months, well, 10 years is a really long time. And now we can start to do things that weren't even possible to achieve 5 years ago are easy now. because we can have that increased bandwidth, that increased storage, that increased processing, and we've learned how to do things better to take advantage of it. So staying on the kind of concept of the background, there's three basic services, and a service is really what defines the cloud concept now. You're metered, they're providing a service, you have a agreement on what they're providing, and it's elastic. So as you need more, you can get it. Or as you need less, you can get rid of it. So infrastructure as a service. This is the very basic stuff. This is the stuff that's out there that's hardcore. This is storage. This is servers. This is, these are things that, I used to take for granted until it went wrong on a project. Amazon Web Services, they offer their storage. I mean, they've been around for a while. They're actually old hat at this. I mean, it's no longer new and innovative, it's just there. It was also the easiest problem to solve in the cloud. Platform as a service. Now we're getting kind of into this fuzzy, warm area, which is half marketing hype and half reality. So a platform is something upon which you build your solution. You build what you're trying to deliver. You're not putting all the components together. It's an actual, platform. And the reason that there's some marketing around this is some people will take their software as a service and say, oh, we're a platform. Maybe, maybe not. What really distinguishes a platform is APIs. How can you connect to it? Can you connect to it any way that you want? Is that built in? Is it documented? Can I use it to build the solutions for my business? And because we're focused on content management, in here, though most of these lessons are applicable across the board, I'm going to throw some of these examples in now that we're getting to the point. Nixu is an open source vendor. They've got offering that they're promoting as platform as a service. But Windows Azure, which hit the news recently, and we'll come back to that, is a platform. Software as a service. Now, this is where I think when we get to the content management space, this is the winning thing. This is the part that's going to make our lives easier. Because building the solutions is a challenge. A good user interface is a challenge. Managing the storage, managing the security, organizing it, the findability, all of that is a challenge. And if someone can solve that problem for us and I can focus on the business problems, then I can actually be doing my job. And there are a lot more logos up here. And I put AOL up here, not because they exist or anyone cares, but an example of back then they were software as a service. The term didn't exist yet. So what we're doing conceptually is not new. The terminology is new. And what we're able to do with it is better. And it's focused. And it's not just consumerized. So something to think about. Cloud architectures. Now, there's a couple of basic architectures. There's the public. This is, when you think of the cloud, this is what most people think of first, is the wilds of the internet. And it's not the wilds like the Amazon. It's more like a safari in Africa. It's got some order and structure to it. Anyone can use it. You're sharing, you're rubbing elbows with your neighbors. Some nicer ones, they have armrests and stuff to kind of keep you segregated. But, it's public. It's a common experience, well-defined, and you don't really control your experience there. Then, of course, we have the private. You have your home theater. You pretty much dictate how you want to experience. This is what you build internally. And these can be expensive to build out really nicely. That looks like a really nice place to sit down and watch a movie. I can't afford to have that kind of place. And for me, it's not just the equipment, it's the space. I got kids. I can't have nice things anymore. So, anyway, but what you're really dealing with is, and this is the scenario that you're going to have to deal with for many reasons, is a hybrid. Now, all these people are watching TVs in the store windows. Well, that's kind of a public place, but they probably have TVs at home. But based on the situation, the scenario, they're using a mix based on what the requirements are for that particular problem. They didn't have, the mobile devices that we had. They said, oh, hey, news is happening. There's a war. Let's go check that out. And then they go home and turn on their TV, their radio, and use their private infrastructure. So it's really a flip back and forth. And what's really important here is, you're like, I'm going to have a hybrid cloud-based content management system. How am I going to do this? I mean, I've got to balance stuff out. It's more complicated than that, and we're going to talk about why. But hybrid, even if you think you're going all public, you're probably wrong. Even if, and we've got a whole slide on that. So, and I do want to follow up on one point. I'm saying cloud-based content management system for a reason. The cloud's a platform. I don't call SharePoint a Windows content management system. It's a content management system. So that's why, but the word cloud is very, very marketing friendly these days. So let's start talking about these key considerations. Savings. The biggest myth out there is that if you move to the cloud, you're going to save money. Maybe. It really depends. And I know that's a very consulting type answer, but it does, because there are a lot of factors to that money that you might be saving. If you're a large organization, you might be able to achieve economies of scale to make a private cloud or the kind of thing worthwhile to build out. You might be able to hire the right experts. You might be able to hire people who have some idea of what they're doing, and you don't have to learn everything. But the smaller you are, the harder it is to achieve that kind of savings from that scaling. On the flip side, if you've got a system that needs to be replaced, well, you're already making changes. Maybe you can save some money because now I don't have to buy the new server and storage. I just have to worry about the new application, which I was going to be buying anyway. And if it's metered, if you look at the total cost of ownership over time, yeah, the license and maintenance costs might be higher, but I'm not maintaining the hardware. I'm not keeping that up to date. I'm not having to apply the upgrade. See, in a couple of years, if you're going to have to upgrade that software if you keep it internally. And that was one of the biggest problems is you're like, I'll upgrade next time. Well, that means next time it's not going to be twice as expensive. It'll be 3 or 4 times more expensive if you skip upgrades, because the software companies design them so that they're easy if you go in sequence. But if you start jumping, it gets progressively harder. So, that savings, it's there, but you've got to sit down and not take it for granted and figure it out. One of the things that people also forget is I can create this new system, but now I have to migrate my old stuff into it, and that in itself is a cost. So you got to look at complete price tag. Like I said, if you're starting from scratch, it's much easier to realize those savings. Security is relative. So we've all learned in the last year, anyone can be hacked. It's just a matter of how badly they want to get into your system. And it's not just the systems. I mean, people can get into the highly secure federal systems. Your data center, if you allow anyone who's not physically wired to your network to access it, can be accessed. And the biggest problem isn't even the technology, it's the people. I leave my device behind. I leave my laptop. People can go in, oh, look, I can, break into a system. I just have to hack this basic, Windows password, which is, relatively easily hacked compared to trying to hack your data center. It's all about the people, and where that breakdown comes from. People take advantage of it. I mean, and why do you think the phishing schemes were so big? It's all about education, teaching people that security is important, teaching them that when we ask you, please password protect your mobile device if you're going to use it for work, that it's not a courtesy, it's to protect the business. So, you just have to watch it from that perspective. The thing is also, when you're dealing with security and you're dealing with these multiple systems, how do I know that the Laurence Hart in this system is the same as the Laurence Hart in this system? I know I'm the same person, but how do those systems know that I'm the same person? And take the security between the two and keep them in sync. Security is not just the standalone. I mean, you used to have, or you still do, have your data center, and you have, Active Directory or LDAP or whatever else, and everything talks to it. Well, now you're spreading out, and not everything can necessarily talk to it. You might not even have it anymore if you just get rid of your data center. So maturity. And this is definitely a software as a service issue more than anything else. These vendors are new. They focus on architecture and usability. And those are two important issues. We expect architecture when we make the move. Usability is a long-standing problem in content management. And if you can solve those two problems, I can live with a lot. But they're still adding features. You know, those advanced features, they're there. They're following in the footsteps of the people who came before. They're adding those features, and they're growing up as vendors. They're not there yet. But I don't use all those features all the time. And so if you can figure out which of those features are critical and tie into the content you need, you know which content you can start moving and taking care of. That's my son, and that was the shot that made me look less overweight. The other one was a better view of him following me, but I looked like 20 pounds heavier. So we didn't use it. So he's a little bigger now. And to be honest with you, the difference is not that great. It's more like a 10-year-old would be following, maybe a 12-year-old, a preteen is following. So they are gaining, and they're growing up faster than my kid, which is actually good. Interoperability. Now this is, for those who know who I am, I love interoperability. It's important, but it's so important in the cloud. You had everything in your data center. You could integrate. You could do whatever you want. Now you're taking it to the cloud. You don't own those APIs anymore. They might not have an API. They may charge you extra to use an API. You have to deal with the security going back and forth. We're not going from silos. We're going to islands. It's no longer as simple as what we had, because now we're dealing with vendors who focus on this one thing. And you know, I see a lot of content management vendors out there in the cloud focus on talking to other vendors. You know, Box wants to talk to SharePoint, and they all go into this wheel, and they all integrate, and they either use CMIS, which is the Content Management Interoperability Services Standard, or not, but they're finding ways to talk to each other. But are they talking to your finance system, your BPM system, all your other systems that you have? It's not enough anymore to just get your content management integrated. Everything has to be integrated and work as one. And moving to the cloud doesn't help that problem at all. So you've got to think about it, because if you have everything in the cloud, you have everything with multiple vendors. And it's a much harder scenario to manage. So it's something you've got to take into account of what has to talk to each other. How are you going to bridge that distance? Ownership. Now this is an important issue, especially when we're dealing with, if you're a U.S. company, you have one set of laws. It's no big deal. You go to Europe, you have different privacy laws in every country, and they're generally more restrictive than they are in the U.S. But aside from that, who owns that information? Who owns that data? If they go out of business, are they going to promise to send you a copy? I mean, if they just shut off the servers one day. I mean, we're getting to the point that most of the vendors aren't going to be doing that. But still, you need to know, you need to have that faith. You need to talk to them saying, how can I get all my data at once? What if you decide in 2 years you want to leave them for another provider? Will they let you get your data out easily, or are you going to have to sit there and work at it? You need to ask these questions before you sign up. Because once you've signed up and they've got your data, they start to have more of that power, because it's harder for you to move. So you've got to know, it's your information. You need to make sure that you can get to it at any time for any reason, even if it's at the detriment of the company you're dealing with, even if they're not motivated or incented to help you. You've got to get that, and you want that in writing. Reliability. Let's get back to Microsoft Azure. You may or may not know that on February 29th, Azure went down. It went down hard. There was a coding bug. And it wasn't I don't know what day the 29th is. They issue security certificates. And what they do is, to issue that, they take the current date and add one digit to the year. The problem was there was no February 29th, 2013. So the certificates were invalid, and the servers stopped talking to each other, and the whole thing went down, and it had a cascading issue. Because someone took a very simple, and you're like, well, that would make sense to me. I mean, even as an ex-developer, I'm thinking, yeah. Bugs, though, are universal. And you have to keep that in mind. Yes, it was unfortunate for Azure because when it happens on a cloud-based thing, it gets in the news, and it's very fun to poke at Microsoft because they're just so nice, big, easy targets after all these years. The problem is reliability is expensive. And when you look at this, it's exponentially expensive. When I've talked to clients over the years, and I've gone to them and they said, this is mission critical, we need 5 nines of reliability. And I show them the architecture, I give them the price, and they go, so how can we cut this price down? And I said, well, we can drop it to 4 nines. And I said, we get rid of this server, this synchronization, drop the second data center. I'm like, okay, I can afford that. Well, one of the things you do get from most cloud providers is you will start to get reliability. Now, you usually will get 3 hours. The 3 nines, the 9-hour reliability is what most of them will get. They're working towards 4 nines, but they're still learning. And like I said, it's exponentially more expensive for you to do it. It's exponentially more expensive for them to do it. So, but the 9 hours is unplanned downtime, and it's random. You don't know when it's going to happen. If you're just on the East Coast, you work 250, days a year, 8 hours a day. That's what, 25% of the time? It might miss you completely. It might hit in the middle of your audit. But you know something? That can happen with your current systems too. There could be a database lock. Your developers who wrote an integration could have a bug. Any developer who says they've never had a bug in their code is lying. Badly. I was a developer. I had bugs. Why I was a good developer? I was able to find them and fix them because I got a lot of practice. So the reliability is key, and this is something that people are like, I don't know, but your stuff's not that much more reliable, and they're getting better consistently. You roll out a new system, that new system starts from scratch. So we're wrapping it all up. So what's the point? It might not save you money. It's going to start creating silos. There's a lot of complications I have to think through. Assuming it's a break-even financially, still, what's the point of it? The point is you. You get to focus on your business. You don't have to worry about the routine, mundane things. You don't have to be a storage expert. You don't have to be as much of a networking expert. You have to focus on solving your business problems. You get to start innovating. You get to be competitive. That's the advantage. Is if you are doing this, you can solve your real problems, not the stuff that shouldn't be a problem at this point. I can't tell you how frustrated I get when I have a problem because of a database lock or storage. I'm like, come on. This is stuff we've been dealing with for 2 decades. Let these people, they've written the software that's tested. They got a lot, millions of users using their system, testing it for these silly little things that I don't have to worry about now. And I can focus on how I can best solve my business problems. And that's really the key benefit to all this. So a couple things to remember is cloud. It's big, it's varied, evolving. Generally speaking, it's improving. You're going to see some public setbacks over the next couple of years. But you know something? Every time, document or SharePoint or OpenText or FileNet go down in someone's data center, you don't hear about it because it's private. You only hear about it in the public cloud because it's public. I'll tell you right now, somewhere, someone is crying because their SharePoint system is down. Probably lots of people. And not because SharePoint's bad, just because there's just numerically more of them. So statistically speaking, there's likely more of them down. The issues are the same. I've got security issues no matter where my data center is, unless I've forced my people to work from home. And the era of mobile, and the era of where we are, and being out and disconnected, if you're accessing any work here right now, your system is vulnerable. Costs, things cost. That's why you want to look at maybe a transitional method. I have to replace this system because it's outdated and it's going to cost a lot of money to get to the latest version. Maybe now's a good time to open up the evaluation and see if a SaaS option can help you out. Avoid islands. Make sure that you can get your data out. Make sure you can communicate between your systems as you move beyond. And if you can't, tell the vendor, I'm not using you because I can't integrate you into my enterprise. Tell them. If people tell them, they'll fix the problem and everyone benefits. So that's it. That's what I've got. Is there any discussion? And anything you don't get in, you can always bug me online. Dan, I didn't ask you any questions.
You almost touched on this, or I think you did, but with the on-premise solutions, one of the problems that people always ask about was, if I decide to change, can I move it from this system to this system to this system? Do you see that getting better or worse with cloud solutions?
I see it staying exactly the same, because it's not they're not incented for you to move everything out. At least when it's on-premise, you have a copy, and you can at least figure it out. You have a copy of the database. You have a copy of the storage. If you had to, you could almost reverse engineer it, or if you have to write some custom thing, you've got time to do it. You have a little bit less flexibility from a cloud perspective. It's not going to get easier to do that. That much is certain.
Any other questions?
Everyone wants to go eat lunch, and I can't believe it.
One more. We got time for one more.
Yeah, from a records discovery perspective, once it's out there, what's your experience with it making sure it's not out there anymore when you disposition that record and it's gone?
So
once you're out in the cloud?
this is something, and I said they weren't on the maturity level. This records management is something that they are not addressing much. I mean, they're not even dealing with retention as a whole. I remember a couple years ago, and this story still applies to that vendor now. I'm just not using the name. A vendor came in, and I was working with a federal agency, and they brought him in because they wanted a cloud solution, and they were well known, and like, let's bring them in. And they said, well, what about DoD 5015.2? And they were like, huh? I'm like, wow, you don't even know what the term is? They can't even. We'll consider it for our project, our roadmap. I'm like, yeah, go. It's very few systems, and I'm not talking about technology systems. It's very few organizations that I feel can always definitively say that when they dispose of something, it's gone, because someone always has something on the laptop. Digital shredding may or may not take place. If it's something that you have to be 100% sure that it's gone, maybe that's not an item to move to the cloud. Maybe that's something you hold back for now until you can get those assurances. They're still realizing the potential. A lot of the vendors are starting to focus on the federal space, because when you have to do with scalability and massive amounts of crap, the federal government's loaded with it. I was working on a project before I was rescued by AIIM on doing the content as an infrastructure as a service, and it was rough. It was hard, and we were learning a lot of lessons. But just wait. If you got records management issues, you're not ready for the cloud yet. It's just not there. The federal and all these cloud agencies, vendors, they're going to learn the lesson the hard way this year, as they aggressive marketably, and then they go, do you have records management? And they go, huh?
All right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to break for lunch and then reconvene here afterwards and continue on.